The color you bleed. At the highest point of the tallest tower in Canterlot, Celestia stood proudly in the morning dim. She rose her horn, and as she did, so the first light of dawn peeked over the mountains that surrounded Equestria on all sides. It spilled over her kingdom like a sea of gold, waking the citizens from the mountain villages first, then the farmers on the foothills and vast plains, finally falling upon the capital. The alabaster city gleamed, and Celestia smiled the sort of smile that only a pony who has worked her craft for a millennia can manage. Far below her, in a lavish room of the palace, a different pony smiled a very different kind of smile. Blue Blood stirred in his large bed, his grin presenting itself to the world even moments after he awoke. He rarely found cause not to smile, after all. "Ire, are you out there?" Blue Blood asked. The door to his chambers creaked open, revealing a tall, steel-gray earth stallion. "Of course, your highness," the pony said. "What do you require?" "Oh, just making sure," Blue Blood said flippantly, rolling out of bed. "We can't have you gallivanting off to do whatever it is you do while Auntie and Mother aren't watching you. What do you do, anyways?" "Sleep," the pony said shortly. "Among other things." Blue Blood heard him mutter something under his breath, but ignored it. Instead, he trotted over to the picture window that let through his aunt's sunlight and sighed happily. "She's done well this morning, don't you think, Ire?" "What?" the gray pony asked, snapped out of his mumbling rant. "What was that, your highness?" "The sunrise," Blue Blood said. "It's beautiful." "I suppose so," Ire said. "I see the weather Pegasi are keeping the clouds clear today." Blue Blood shook his head. "Oh, Ire, all you ever think of is the weather, isn't it? The weather, or the taxes, or polishing your armor." "It is my duty, sire. Speaking of my duty, I've requested that you don't call me Ire."
"Oh, but your title really is such a mouthful," the unicorn whined. "I can't call you Captain Sir Iron Towers every time I need you, now can I? Why, we'd take all day just to get ready in the morning, and besides, Ire fits you so well, don't you think? No, I think I'll just keep calling you Ire."
"Very well, sir," the captain said flatly.
Blue Blood looked out the window for a while longer, before spinning around.
"Well, what are we just standing for here, Ire?" he asked impatiently. "Why haven't you gotten the chambermaids to get me ready this morning? We have business today, you know." "Of course, sire," Iron said, bowing and backing out the door. "My apologies. I'll fetch some maids for you right away."
Very good, Blue Blood said, turning back to the window. Iron left the room and sighed deeply. Standing right in front of him was a pair of Earth Pony mares. "Well, the prince might need us," one of them said slowly, leaning away from the scowling captain. The stallion sighed and rubbed his eyes.
Yes, he wants to see you, but let's not go in just yet, all right?"
"Oh dear," the other mare said. "Is His Highness in a mood?"
"Of course he is," Iron growled. "He is always in a mood. That blasted brat is a mood."
The mares giggled, and Iron shook his head.
"I don't think I can take much more of that colt. It's just one more day, though."
"One more day until what?" the mare asked. Iron looked down at her, as if he had only just realized the mares were still there.
"One more day until I'm off rotation. I'll be back on the watch duty. Guarding His Highness will be some pony else's problem."
"That's a good plan," the older of the mares said. "I heard the last pony they had him guarding full-time had to retire early. Something about him being worse than anything the Westerners had. Shifting ponies out could at least make him bearable." "Is he really so bad?" the other mare asked. "I've never spoken with the prince, but he seems quite charming." "Oh, he is, from a distance," the older mare explained. "But once you actually talk to him, well, I suppose you'll see."
"Yes, we may as well," Iron growled. "If we wait any longer, he's likely to be even worse when you speak with him." He pushed the door open, the door to Blue Blood's chambers, allowing the two mares to walk in. Blue Blood had moved back to the bed, where he was lounging lazily. "Ah, there you are," the unicorn said, sitting up. "I was beginning to think you'd run off." He tilted his head as the two maids approached him and asked, "You couldn't find any unicorns?" "Ah, we were just in the area, sire," the older mare said, "and the captain asked us to help you ready yourself. We're more than capable—" "But you'll take so long," Blue Blood insisted. "A pair of unicorns would be much faster, and they could even get back to cleaning up the ballroom for this evening." "There are more than enough ponies cleaning the ballroom, your highness. These two will do for this morning." "Yes, we will," the older mare said again. "I've helped your mother get ready a time or two, and well, Lilac here may be new, but she's a very quick worker." "Oh, very well." Blue Blood gave a long-suffering sigh. He stood in the middle of the room, and Lilac's partner directed her. "Fetch the brush and the scissors from the dresser, will you, dear?" she asked. Lilac did as she was beckoned, while the older mare went to Blue Blood's wardrobe and opened it. She selected a clean collar and laid it out on the bed. Lilac returned with the brush and scissors, and the pair went to work on the white unicorn. Lilac trimmed his fetlocks carefully, while the other maid brushed down his mane and coat. After a few minutes of work, the stallion looked presentable, albeit bare. Lilac fetched the collar, and with the older maid's help it was soon around Blue Blood's neck, complementing the handsome stallion. "Well, I am impressed," Blue Blood said, inspecting himself in a mirror. Lilac smiled happily, but her partner just rolled her eyes. Iron tensed as well, to Lilac's confusion. Then Blue Blood turned to the trio and spoke again. "I never would have expected you poor earth ponies to pull it off," he said happily, taking Lilac's hoof. Your Highness?" Lilac asked, taken aback. "You've done almost as good a job as any pair of unicorns could have," he said happily. "Especially you, dear. Trimming those fetlocks must have been no easy task for your kind. What's your name?" Lilac, your Highness," Lilac sputtered. She didn't fully understand what was happening, but she felt vaguely insulted. "Lilac, a lovely name," the prince told her. "It suits you." Thank you?" "It's just a shame you're a peasant," Blue Blood said. "And a simple earth pony at that. You're a very pretty mare." Lilac simply stared until her partner took a gentle hold of her shoulders. "Thank you very much, your Highness," she said, "but we really must be going. We have more work to do to be ready for this evening." "Oh yes, of course." Blue Blood smiled. The two mares trotted out of his room. When they were in the safety of the hallway, Lilac asked, "What just happened?" "Blue Blood just happened, dear," her partner said. "I think Iron really must need that break. Though Blue Blood was much better than usual today." Hours later, Blue Blood was in the palace's garden, accompanied by the surly captain. The prince sauntered among the flower patches, occasionally stopping to inspect a rose or two. "And here I thought you seemed so eager to get to your duties." Iron sighed. Blue Blood flipped his mane and inspected another flower. "My duty is to look as good as I possibly can for all the mares tonight," the stallion told his bodyguard. Iron rolled his eyes behind the prince's back. "I thought you were pleased with how the maids did." "Oh, they did well enough, I suppose," the prince said, waving a hoof dismissively. "But I need a unicorn's touch to be complete. I must be as beautiful as Auntie's sunrise for this evening. I'd hardly expect you to understand, Ire." "Indeed not," the earth pony said coldly. Blue Blood ignored him and selected a rose from the bush. He bit off the stem and tucked it in his collar with his magic. "There we are. Perfect. What do you think, Ire?" The gray pony simply stared at him, blinking. "I'm sure a unicorn's taste is better than anything I could muster, sire." Blue Blood sighed and shook his head. "You shouldn't be so serious all the time, Ire. It can't be good for you. Why, my last guard had to retire." "I know." "Yes." Blue Blood's expression fouled. "Yes, he did.
But he retired of his own choice. You might not get the same opportunity, Ire, if you do not keep your tone with me." The two ponies glowered at each other for a moment. "Yes, sire. My apologies." Blue Blood nodded and walked past his guard. "Good. Come along, then. Let's see how the ballroom is coming along." "Yes, your highness." Following after the prince, the two entered the palace and walked in silence, save for the clip-clopping of their hooves across the polished floor. Iron stared daggers into the back of his lord's head the whole way, but the unicorn seemed unaware of the seething anger emanating from behind him. Eventually, the pair reached the ballroom, and Blue Blood gestured to Iron to open the large doors. The earth pony did as he was beckoned, and Blue Blood gasped in shock. "Oh, no, 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 no!" he cried. All the servants decorating turned to stare at him, and old Pegasus, apparently the pony in charge, walked respectfully up to the prince. "What seems to be the matter, your highness?" he asked, bowing to the stallion. Blue Blood ignored him, walking further into the ballroom. "This is all wrong! This won't do at all!" he exclaimed. What won't do, sire?" the old stallion asked again, following the prince. "This! All of it!" Blue Blood said, waving his hooves around. "Ambassadors are coming from all of Equestria, all over the world tonight to present their best mares to court me. The ballroom must display me favorably to them. The colors are all wrong, and there's no focus. Why, I'll just blend right into the background." "With respect, sire," the old pony said carefully, "while it is true that mayors may come to court you, the delegates are here for other diplomatic purposes." "Well, it won't hurt those purposes if I am given the proper amount of attention, now will it?" Blue Blood said, looking down at the pony. "Now fix it!" "But sire," the old stallion objected. "But sire, it would take hours to change now. We'd have to call in the other servants and, well, call in other ponies to work on it then," Blue Blood said. "Just have to fix it for this evening. We are the capital of the greatest nation on the planet. We must look the part for our guests." Yes, sire," the old pony said, defeated. He clapped his hooves together and called out to the workers, "You heard his highness. We're changing it. Misty, run down to the kitchens and see if there's anyone else who can lend a hoof." Blue Blood nodded and turned back to his guard, whose expression could sour milk. The white unicorn seemed oblivious to this, however, and simply gestured for him to follow. "Come along, Ire. We should make certain that none of the other servants have managed to mess up their tasks for this evening." The day wore on, as days are wont to do. Before too long, Celestia returned to her tall tower and aided the sun in its descent below the mountains. A soft clopping of hooves came from behind her, and Celestia turned to greet her little sister. The pair slapped hooves, the signal for their trade-off that Celestia had taught her sister when she returned, and Luna took to the air. She lifted her horn to the heavens as the milky face of the moon rose into view, silhouetting the little princess. She landed back on the tower, ruffled her wings proudly as her sister chuckled. "Are we putting on a show now, Luna?" Celestia asked. Luna smirked and replied, "I'm an artist, Sally. I'm allowed to be proud of my work." "You know, you could be even more proud of your work with a few ponies around to compliment you." "Oh, I don't know," Luna said, the confidence fading from her voice. "I think it's best if I just keep my head down for a while. Let the whole eternal night thing blow over first. Maybe a generation or two." Celestia sighed and jostled her little sister playfully. "You'll have to come out of your shell eventually, you know." "Come down to the party tonight, Luna. They'll be all compliments, you'll see. No pony is afraid of the night anymore." "Oh, please, Sally," Luna snorted, leaning over the balcony. "Compliments from pumped-up aristocrats? If I want compliments on my stars, I'll go find a sailor." "Some of those pumped-up aristocrats are family, you know," Celestia goaded. "You don't even want to see your nephew find a nice mare?" "Not my nephew," Luna scoffed.
I wasn't around when he was being raised. I'd have had a few things to say about that. Luna, Celestia started, but her sister simply rolled her eyes and flew over the balcony. I'm sorry, Celestia, but it's just not for me. I can barely stand being around normal ponies after so long, but them? It's just so petty. It's not my world, Celestia. All right, Celestia smiled. Have a good night, sister. I'll see you again at dawn. Of course, Luna said. She flew in close and nuzzled her sister's neck before taking off again. Celestia chuckled and shook her head. She turned back into the tower and made her way down to the castle proper. It would have been much faster to fly, but she couldn't be seen doing that in front of this crowd. Heaven forbid nobility be seen doing something for itself. Some days she wondered if Luna didn't have the right idea, avoiding the aristocracy like she did. Still, someone had to keep everything together. She entered the ballroom as quietly as she could, but nevertheless, all eyes in the room soon turned to her. She made her way through the throng of ponies, approaching the head of the room where she sat, flanked on one side by her great-niece, and on the other side by her slightly greater nephew, Blue Blood. Good evening, Auntie, Blue Blood greeted her. His mother did similarly. Celestia smiled at both of them, and a voice piped up over the crowd. Attention! Your attention, please, the voice said. The crowd managed to unstick its gaze from Celestia, turning to a unicorn in a finely crafted green suit. Equestria's foreign affairs minister, the stallion who had made most of the arrangements for the evening. Thank you very much, he said, and thank you for being here with all of us this evening. I know it must be difficult to travel so far for many of you. I'm sure you all understand the importance of this conference, of course. As you all know, we are gathered to deal with some issues of great unrest among the countries along Equestria's borders. Blue Blood smirked to himself. Celestia had decided the best way to deal with the issue was to unite the countries through marriage. Not that she'd ever admit it to anyone, of course. That was why so many princesses and princes were attending. They would try to match up countries, and in a few generations, Equestria and its surrounding countries would all be one single kingdom. Of course, everyone knew that Blue Blood was the prize of the evening. Whoever married him, their country would merge with Equestria. It would be a great honor to become a province of the largest and most influential country in the world. Blue Blood's thoughts were interrupted as the delegates began to applaud, signaling the end of the minister's speech. The opening ceremony would begin, to let the nobility mingle amongst themselves, and meet the prospective matches before they would be bartered off the next day. Celestia and Blue Blood's mother stood and walked into the crowd, but Blue Blood remained seated at the front, his chest puffed out proudly. Iron stood behind him, looking around the room. Not going to mingle, your highness? He asked, though not with any sort of enthusiasm. Blue Blood flipped his hair. Of course not. They will come to me, of course. Ah, of course. Sure enough, a mare did break from the throng to approach the prince. She was a deep purple unicorn, her mane the color of wheat, and she was adorned with a beautiful green dress of wrappings. Good evening, she said. Blue Blood smiled handsomely. It is indeed Miss Princess Golden Dreams, she said, offering her hoof. Blue Blood took it gently. Prince Blue Blood. It's delightful to meet you, Princess. Likewise, I'm sure. You are the Prince of Equestria, I presume? She looked him up and down, and gave a coy smile. I hail from the kingdom to the west, Aloa. Aloa, Blue Blood said. I hadn't heard that the Aloans would be here. In truth, he hadn't heard who was going to be coming one way or another. He was only barely acquainted with the surrounding countries to begin with. Geography had not been his best subject. Still, the mayor didn't need to know that, and it seemed that he had touched on a conversation piece inadvertently. Oh, well, she shrugged. I didn't want to, but father insisted. He said it was important to the future of the country.
She glanced at Blue Blood again and said, "Of course, I'm quite glad I came now." "I don't doubt it," Blue Blood said, puffing out his chest. A piano key sounded across the ballroom, and slowly the band that had assembled at the other side of the room began to play their first piece of the evening. "Would you care to dance, Princess?" Blue Blood asked, pumping out every ounce of charm he had into his words. Golden Dreams fluttered her eyelashes at him and smiled sweetly. "I would love to, I'm sure," she said. The two unicorns trotted onto the dance floor, where pairs of ponies had already begun to twirl to the band's waltz. Iron didn't follow the prince, instead remaining behind the thrones. After a while he moved into the crowd, still skirting the walls of the room. He eventually came to sit beside a short, squat unicorn. "He's dancing with your princess," Iron muttered. "Should we be worried?" "With Goldie? Hardly. She no doubt sees him as just another dalliance. She won't miss him at all." "Then everything is still ready." "As soon as all this winds down." "Good. I couldn't bear to dote on that wretched excuse for a stallion any longer." Now, Mr. Towers," the unicorn said smugly, "we mustn't speak that way about our superiors." "Oh well." Iron grinned wryly. "I suppose I can wait a few more hours." He stood up and crossed the room to a position where he could better watch the obnoxious prince. Blue Blood spent most of the night with the Alolan princess. They danced for a while, then ate and chatted, then danced a while longer. Eventually the moon was high in the night sky, and the equestrian foreign affairs minister spoke again. "Thank you all very much," he said to the crowd. Celestia stood by his side, adding the weight of royalty, not to mention divinity, to his words, as he reminded all the guests where they would meet the next day to discuss how to quell the unrest, as it was so euphemistically put. Blue Blood could not help but grin. No doubt he would walk away from the meeting with Golden Dreams as his bride-to-be. Figuratively speaking, of course. With Auntie and Mother there was no reason for Blue Blood himself to attend the meeting. She was an excellent prize, beautiful, a tad dim, and Aloha was the second largest country in the region next to Equestria. Adding it to one of their provinces would increase the kingdom's influence even further. The guests began to file out of the ballroom, escorted to the chambers set aside for them by the palace guards. Blue Blood bid farewell to his dance partner, and Iron came to stand beside him. "An enjoyable evening, your highness?" he asked, a hint of humor creeping into his voice for the first time that day. "I think so, yes," Blue Blood said smugly. "And where did you get off to, Sleeping?" He cocked an eyebrow at Iron, an expression the Earth Pony knew well. He had begun guarding Blue Blood when he was an adolescent, but the unicorn still made the same "I know something that can get you in trouble" expression. Iron had to fight the urge to smile. He fought it so well, in fact, that any trace of good mood faded from his face. "I was watching from the sidelines, sire," he explained. "I would not want to be in your way while you danced." "Ah, of course," Blue Blood said. "Well, I think it's been quite a day. I would like to retire for the evening, Ire." "Very well, sir," Iron said, bowing. The two ponies left the ballroom, walking through the palace hallways. Pleased as he was about the evening, Blue Blood couldn't help but notice that many of the guards he saw were not wearing equestrian armor. "Why are all the guards dressed oddly?" he asked, trying to feign disinterest. "They aren't our guards," Iron told him. "They came with the guests. Her Majesty thought a show of trust would help things along, so she gave all the guards the night off, save for the royal families." "Ah, very good. Well, as long as my chambers are well guarded, that's quite all right." "Indeed." Iron smiled. The two were silent for the rest of the trip until they arrived at Blue Blood's chambers, which were not, as he had expected, guarded by equestrians.
Instead, the pair of unicorns that stood before them, dressed in plain steel armor, dressed with green and blue wrappings, Alolan armor. Blue Blood took a step back, but soon regained his composure. "What is the meaning of this?" he asked. The two guards bowed and one spoke. "You were called for, your highness," he said. "You were requested in an Alolan room for the night." Blue Blood stared for a moment, before an impossibly smug grin came over him. My, it seems I've made quite an impression on our guest the princess, don't you think, Ire? "It would certainly seem that way, wouldn't it?" Iron agreed. The two Alolan ponies began to lead the prince, with Iron trailing behind. Blue Blood stood proud and tall, too full of himself to notice where he was being led. After a while, the polished marble floors that the noble stallion was used to gave way to cobblestone. Still, he seemed devoid of any thought other than his own greatness, until they stopped in front of a simple wooden door. "This is the princess's room?" Blue Blood asked, shying away. "This is a servant's room!" "Her Highness is sleeping in the north quarter, actually," the Alolan guard told him. "You will have different accommodations this evening." The door opened and the Aloans shoved Blue Blood inside. "What is the meaning of this?" Blue Blood shouted, whipping his head around. Another shove came from the darkness, throwing him to the ground. The door slammed shut and the room was illuminated by torchlight. The room was filled with a few Alolan guards and the Alolan ambassador. "Hello, Blue Blood," the ambassador said, his words oozing with fake charm that Blue Blood recognized all too well. "You will address me by my proper title," Blue Blood said, getting to his hooves. He was shoved to the ground again, this time by Iron. "He was, you pompous oaf," Iron sneered at him. "Or at least by the end of the night he will have. You're going on a trip, Colt. I'll bet you can guess where." "Why are you doing this?" Blue Blood asked, leaning away from Iron. The ambassador cleared his throat. "It isn't personal, at least not for me. But we need to get you out of the way. Equestria has more than enough power. You don't really need this conference, so you're going to stay away until the negotiations are done, all right?" "For the record," Iron cut in, "it is personal for me." The ambassador sighed. "You won't get away with this," Blue Blood shouted. "Auntie will know I'm missing and—" A hoof in the ribs silenced him mid-sentence. "Shut up, Colt," Iron sneered. "We can't have you yelling now, can we? You'd upset the other guests." Blue Blood coughed violently and Iron grinned. "You know, that was sort of fun. Can I do it again?" "Oh, be my guest," the ambassador shrugged. "He doesn't need to be in any sort of condition where we're going to be taking him." "Goody," Iron said. He kicked Blue Blood in the gut again, sending the stallion writhing across the floor. He snorted gleefully and ground his hoof into Blue Blood's ribs. The prince grunted in pain and Iron pressed down harder. "I take that back," the ambassador said, interrupting the guards. "Fun. Stop that. The carriage isn't here yet and we can't afford to make much noise while we're in here. If one of your men finds us, we're all dead, including you. You aren't clever enough to talk your way out of this." Iron snorted and took his hoof off the prince, who groaned miserably. "We'll have your men shut him up then. You unicorns all think you're so special, so prove it." "My men are trained in combat," the ambassador said coldly. "The best they could do is hold his mouth shut." Iron shook his head and leaned against the wall beside Blue Blood. The room fell into silence, save for Blue Blood's occasional whimpers. The tension in the room was palpable as they waited. Even the room itself seemed to mirror the ambassador's sickly, worried expression. Iron simply scowled, picking something from the ball's buffet out of his teeth. Suddenly,
He felt Blue Blood's hoof on his leg. "Iron?" Blue Blood said weakly. "Iron, why are you doing this? Did they bribe you? Threaten you? Whatever it is, Auntie can help." Iron smirked and leaned into the injured unicorn's face. "They didn't pay me. They didn't threaten me or blackmail me. The only thing I get out of this is a way out. Oh, and you." He flashed his teeth at the unicorn and prodded him with his hoof. "Yes, Prince Blueblood, you get to hurt him. That's what they told me, Colt. And you know what? I jumped at the chance to hurt you. You stupid, arrogant princeling, you pathetic excuse for a stallion. They only asked me because I'm close to you. Any one of the servants, anyone who ever has to deal with you, they'd all do the same. Every single pony in this castle would jump at the chance to watch you suffer." He was nearly nose to nose with Blue Blood now. A wide, malicious grin spread across his face. Blue Blood's eyes were wide with fear, and he tried to struggle backwards, but Iron stomped a hoof down on his mane to keep him in place. "You know why?" the pony asked. "You wanna guess? Go on, guess. I want to know what you think ponies think about you. I want to hear you say that they care about you, so it'll be that much sweeter when you learn the truth." They do care," Blue Blood said, his voice shaking. "I'm the prince. They all care about my well-being. That's their job." "Yeah, that's right. It's their job. Not one of them would care for you if they had any choice in the matter. They like your aunt, they like your mother just fine. But you, they all hate you. You're just some worthless pile of flesh to them. Another nuisance to deal with in the day." "That isn't true," Blue Blood insisted. Even he didn't seem convinced by his words. "Say that all you want, but you're going to know the truth every bit as much as I do. Hell, I bet that's why you're so full of yourself. You know you aren't worth anything. The truth is, I'm not just doing the Aloans a favor. I'm doing Equestria a favor too. Now your mama can just start over. Have a foal who's worth something." "Iron," the ambassador said sharply. "The carriage is here. Let's go." "Good," Iron said, straightening up. "As soon as we get away from here, we can start to make some noise. Load him in." Blue Blood felt magic take hold of his body, lifting him into the air. The Aloan soldiers took him out of the back door and out onto the palace's back lawn. A large plain carriage was waiting there, hitched to a pair of ponies wearing simple rags. Blue Blood was tossed unceremoniously into the back, followed by Iron, the ambassador, and a half-dozen soldiers. The door shut, and a jerking let the passengers know that the transport had begun. Blue Blood lay in the middle of the carriage, trying to chase Iron's words out of his head, but they wouldn't leave. He began to whimper, only for Iron to kick him in the back. "We're not in the castle anymore," the guard sneered. "I can do that now. In fact, every time you whimper, you get a kick. Oh hey, I'll get a kick out of that too." He laughed cruelly, and Blue Blood shivered and suppressed a squeak. The cart rolled for about an hour, and Iron kept true to his word. Whenever so much as a squeak escaped Blue Blood's lips, Iron would kick him violently in the back. Eventually the captain got bored, or Blue Blood simply stopped making noise. Either way, Iron spoke up. "Where are we?" the ambassador asked, shaking away his tiredness. "We should be at the bottom of the mountains. We're close to Aloan territory now." "Close to the exchange point?" We'll reach it in a few minutes. Yes, why?
Tell your ponies to move faster. I want to get there early. I want some time with the whelp.
Haven't you had enough of him yet? The ambassador asked, disgust clear in his voice.
Just do it.
Iron scowled. The ambassador sighed and commanded them to pick up the pace. They reached their destination within a couple of minutes, and Iron kicked Blue Blood out of the back of the carriage. He looked around and sighed happily.
Shale, he said. Lots of shale here. That's good.
Dare I ask why? The ambassador asked.
Shale is flat,
Iron said, as if that explained everything.
Get your ponies to take him over to that piece there.
He gestured to a large slab. The soldiers did as they were commanded, when Iron stepped back into the carriage to get something. Blue Blood couldn't see what Iron was getting until he brought it around to the stone where the unicorn lay. The cruel earth pony carried an equally cruel-looking axe in his mouth, grinning fiendishly around the handle.
Hold him down,
Iron said. What do you mean? One of the soldiers asked. Iron glowered at the soldier, who shrunk back.
I mean, hold him down.
The soldiers did so, pressing Blue Blood against the rock with their magic. Iron dropped the axe on the slab in front of Blue Blood's face. What are you going to do? The prince asked, his voice trembling. Iron grinned evilly.
Guess. Go on. Guess.
His grin was so wide that Blue Blood thought he could see every tooth in his mouth, and his eyes bugged out of his skull like even they wanted to leap out and attack the prince. His hot breath blew across the unicorn's face as he chuckled.
I'll bet you'll do great. You're a unicorn, after all. You're so great, so superior to us humble earth ponies, he quoted in a mocking imitation of Blue Blood's voice. But you know, we do try, and there's a lot of things we're pretty good at. Some things we're even better at than you unicorns. But you'll find that out soon enough.
Iron, the ambassador cut in, is this really necessary?
Of course it's necessary,
Iron roared, turning sharply on the fat unicorn.
You said yourself, we can't risk having him seen when he's in Aloha. It would tip everyone off. They'd know about your precious plan. Well, no pony's going to recognize him now. They'll all be looking for a unicorn, and they aren't going to find one.
He whipped around, screaming at the soldiers.
Hold him down!
They all flinched back, releasing the pressure on Blue Blood just enough for him to struggle. Please, Iron! Please, don't do this!
Oh, you're begging now?
Iron gave a hissing laugh.
You'll think it'll make up for all the crap I had to deal with you?
I'm sorry, Blue Blood cried again. I'm sorry, Iron, I didn't mean it. He struggled against the soldier's magic, writhing as hard as he could on the rock. His heart was frozen in his chest as he struggled. He trembled violently.
I said, hold him down!
Iron roared. Magic slammed against Blue Blood, pressing him down so hard he could barely breathe. Please, don't, Iron, Blue Blood managed to wheeze. Please, don't do it.
Don't worry, Colt,
Iron chuckled, leaning in close to Blue Blood and brushing his mane aside.
I won't hurt a hair on that pretty little mane of yours.
He gave a barking laugh, and one of the soldiers looked away.
Now, Blue Blood,
Iron hissed.
Let's find out what color you really bleed.
He took the axe in his mouth, lifted it up, laughing through the handle. The prince's eyes squeezed shut. Please, 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 he begged. The axe came down. Pain erupted in Blue Blood's skull.
It felt like his forehead was on fire. It felt like his mind was on fire. He was vaguely aware of an explosion of color, of Iron laughing hysterically, but he didn't care. The pain was his world. It was his everything. It spread through his entire body, going far and wide like the roots of a great ash tree. It felt like it spread out of his body, into the bodies of the guards that held him down, into the ambassador. They broke their hold, but Blue Blood didn't flail or scream. He couldn't. His entire body was on fire. His entire body was fire. Then it was ice. Then it was air. And the earth. Then, for the briefest moment, his body was light. But the light faded, and there was only darkness. Blue Blood's world went dark, and soon it disappeared.